Whenever I say the word Steven Universe, what is it that you think of? Oftentimes when I ask this to people on various chat rooms online, I tend to get a mixed bag of people who either claim it's the best show in the world, or the other group of people who claim that it's awful, while a small percentage of people tend to think it's more in the middle about the show. However, one thing at least with most of the people that I've asked that I know for a full-on fact is that the Steven Universe fanbase and community is generally really toxic. No, that is not an understatement, nor is it a buzzword. It is the absolute 100% truth. Now, while I'm not going to list every single little action that these group of degenerates online have done, as that would take way too much time to list, I will mention a few things that were committed by these people. One such example of their god-awful attitude was a time that one of the artists of the show nearly ended her own life because of the constant bullying that she had received by various fans on Tumblr. Why is that? What caused everybody to issue various death threats and the like to one of the staff of the show? Did she say something messed up, disgusting? Nope. She drew one of the characters a little bit thinner. Yes, you heard me right. Thinner. All these people got ticked off because someone drew one of the characters just a tad bit skinnier. If that sounds like one of the stupidest reasons to get angry about something, you'd be correct. Now, while there are countless other things that these people have done that really make everything about this show awful, I really don't feel it's necessary to list any of them anymore. Mostly because of the fact that it's been mentioned so many times in other people's videos, and honestly, this article would just continuously drone on way too much. However, that's not to say that I won't be talking more about this franchise, as they've done something to me that not only made me lose my absolute mind, but also hurts someone that I am very close to. That person being my brother. I will admit, I never was, nor will I ever be, a fan of Steven Universe, and nothing will ever change that. However, my brother Daniel, my younger brother, was practically obsessed with the show when it first came out, even going as so far to start writing up stories and doing artwork just because of how much he loved the show. Now, I'm not going to deny the fact that I was a little bit more than annoyed at the constant mentioning and attention that Steven Universe and the Crystal Gems wind up getting at dinner time every night, but hey, it made my brother happy, so who the heck was I to judge? If anything, I was actually a lot more proud of him than anything, especially since he had managed to finally break out of his isolation habit that he had quite frequently when he was living with us that he had, and essentially basically just came out of his shell and interacted with a lot more people. Now, before I continue with this, I think it's important to discuss a little bit about Daniel, as what happened later on in the year won't make a whole lot of sense if I don't explain it. You see, Daniel, while being a very bright kid, suffered from a few mental issues, specifically a mild case of paranoia and other various things that I can't really recall that would trigger if he was threatened in any way. So, why is this a problem if it's so mild? Well, whenever Daniel had one of his breakdowns or meltdowns due to his paranoia, he became violent. So much so that he had to at least be taken out of the house by police at least once. Thankfully, it was only once. At least for the time being. The other times that it did happen basically had to involve me and my parents holding him down for at least a few minutes in order to get him to calm down. Of course, though, this is very rare, so it was never really that much of a problem growing up. With that said, this is where things got bad. My brother, after watching the first season or so of Steven Universe, and improving more on his artwork, decided to create a Tumblr account to share some of his artwork with the world around him. I honestly didn't have much of a problem with this, although this is before I knew what kind of messed up people who roamed and dominated that site could be. The next week or so actually went by rather alright. Daniel's Tumblr account was actually doing quite well, and he was getting a lot of praise for the artwork that he was doing. And actually made some pretty good money off of a few commissions that he was given by a few other artists on the platform. Heck, it even seemed like he was actually going to start up his own little Patreon business as well for the commissions that he was getting. Unfortunately, though, all that amount of praise and everything wind up literally disappearing after he had been sent his last commission that someone online had asked for him to do. Now, the actual drawing that was described for him to actually do was nothing really that special. It was basically one of the gems, Amethyst, I believe, dressed up as a punk rocker in an unnamed band. Yeah, not the most original request, but still okay, I guess. However, during his drawing, he decided that he wanted the character to be a little bit, well, actually a lot of bit skinnier, so that it really showed the various glow sticks and instruments and other things like such that Amethyst was playing and or holding around. That was a very big mistake on his part. When he had submitted that artwork to his Tumblr account, all hell broke loose. In the span of just 2 weeks, my brother was receiving death threats, threats of doxing, and various other calls and slurs that would make even the most old-school Southern Baptist man disgusted. Now, normally I would have helped out my brother and attempted to try and stop these situations from continuing on, as I've had to do in the past. Unfortunately, though, my brother is a very, very quiet and introverted person and tends not to say anything about any problems that he's going through, unless he's either asked or is forced to by my parents. And not only that, he's really good at hiding things. So the bullying and the like continued on more and more and more, growing in severity until my brother, after a really bad series of events that supposedly had a couple of Tumblr people sitting there and threatening to leak a bunch of random photoshopped images of him that I can't specifically say what they were, but they were definitely awful, all around the world, thus ruining his life, and that basically set him on edge. He wound up having a severe panic attack after all of that. It was so bad that he had to be rushed to the hospital. It was only then, after my brother was checked out and he was in his bed, that he finally broke down and admitted everything that was going on with them. While I personally wasn't that surprised by what had happened, especially after reading up what a lot of people on Tumblr tend to do, my parents, well, let's just say that vengeance was a very underrated term for them. They basically wanted to find these people who had done this to their kid and not just utterly ruin them for the rest of their lives, but string them up by their toes and beat them black and blue with a paddle. I'm not kidding. They wanted to do all of that, and they didn't waste time starting it all off. However, given the intensity of this situation, they really weren't able to do very much about it. The very most they actually were able to do was have a couple of the doxers arrested for cyberbullying. But that was close to about it. I tried my hand in solving this whole thing, contacting the admins of Tumblr to try and settle this issue, removing the artwork from my brother's Tumblr page. Hell, I even deleted the entire Tumblr account itself. Nothing stopped these people from sending in their disgusting, Cheeto-covered, dusted hand hate mail to my brother, just because of a god-dang picture. The final straw of the whole thing was when a few of their Tumblr warriors decided to take the bullying up a notch. Now, while I know it might sound rather insane what I'm about to say, hear me out. These people really did take it up a notch. Apparently, a few of the doxers that hadn't been banned from the platform shared our home address to more than a few people in our town, and then, with that, started making up a bunch of lies and the like about my little brother in an attempt to try and ruin his life and his social career. And it worked. It resulted from everyone at my school either shunning my brother entirely or calling various slurs and the like. This went on for weeks, and it broke him. It broke my brother. It broke my best friend. And this was evident after a few of the classmates had started calling him terrible things and like that he's already heard of, but one of them actually wound up punching him in the back of his head. And what happened next, I'm not surprised, and if anything, I was rooting for him. My brother snapped. He beat the ever-living hell out of those people in that fit of rage. It was actually quite a surprise that any of them even survived that, as their faces, from what I was told by my parents afterwards, looked identical to a smashed tomato that had been smashed on the counter in the kitchen. Now, I thought that the whole thing would have ended like that, but it didn't. It got worse. Because of what my brother did, my brother was charged with assault, despite the fact that being self-defense. He was also expelled from the school, and the judge sentenced him into a mental facility until he turns 18, basically ridding himself of any more of a childhood for the rest of his life. Again, all of this because of one single picture. Our family after that was wrecked with various debts to pay from lawyers, as well as various medical bills from the 3 quote-unquote victims that my brother attacked. To make matters worse, the Tumblrites had a massive field day celebrating my brother's incarceration. Some even started GoFundMe pages to pay for the medical bills of the quote-unquote victims that had attacked my brother. As you would have expected, this made me completely and utterly livid. In fact, if it wasn't for my parents trying to calm me down, I probably would have went out, doxed these people myself, and went on a murder spree. I hated them. I hated every single one of them on that godforsaken website. And still to this very day, I hate them with a burning passion. And I wanted to do something about it. But there was one problem with that. What in the world was I going to do? After some contemplation, I decided that I would turn to a website that could possibly be my saving grace. 4chan. Basically the opposite of Tumblr. Still kind of crazy, but what other bet did I have? It wasn't exactly a very easy task to get my message that I had posted on there to go viral without people mocking me, or basically doing a bunch of, crap posts and things like that. But eventually, a few people actually took it seriously, and it was on the front page of 4chan for a long time. This, in turn, actually got more than 10,000 people willing and, in a sense, wanting to help me get my vengeance against those people who had done that to me. And a few of them were more than likely willing to do it for no cost at all. After some talking with a few of the people on the site, I came up with what I was going to make. Those monsters wanted to ruin the life of someone because of Steven Universe? Then I was going to ruin their love for Steven Universe permanently as well. Yeah, I know. Not a very great plan, especially knowing that it really wouldn't do too much for my brother, who still, by the way, is rotting in that place. But at the time, it was the best decision I could think of. So after a little bit of time, when I wasn't working on schoolwork, I wrote down via a Word document a summary of what I wanted to do, and allowed the animators and the like to pretty much come up with how they felt the things should be made. They agreed, and I didn't hear from them for at least a good 4 months. During that time, my parents and I had tried to find a way to get the judge's decision reversed, even if that meant putting us all in debt in the process. I mean, granted, we were already in debt as it is, but we were willing to make it worse if it meant having my brother back in the family again. However, no matter how many lawyers we contacted, no matter how many court cases we set up and the like, all the verdicts were the exact same. My brother wasn't fit to be out in society due to his issues, and was to stay in the psych ward until he became of legal age. And that was that. Nothing else could be done for him, except visit him every so often when we had the money to actually give him our support, as the place that he was put into was about a state away. As for the messages, they kept on going. So much so that we actually had to move out of our house. Not like it really mattered anyway. The fees and the like that we were all paying were pretty much basically forced us to move out of our house anyway, because we could barely even afford them, much less afford them and our house. I did what I honestly could to try and support my family. But every single job I had applied to, I was either rejected outright, or even during the interviews, the person interviewing me would start bringing up the subject of my little brother, and would then proceed to reject me on the spot. It was horrible. After a long day of looking around on jobs online one day, and seeing how it wasn't getting anywhere, I pretty much gave up and slumped in my bed. That is until I wound up getting a notification on my phone. I checked it and my eyes lit up a bit. There was an email there. An email from a few of the people who I had messaged on 4chan. Apparently, the animation that I had asked them to do had been completed, and that I was free to take a look at it and see if it was good enough to be put on Tumblr. I opened it up and downloaded the file. It took a little bit to download, but when it was finally done, I clicked on it and began watching. The episode itself started out with the startup jingle and of the show Steven Universe, with Garnet initiating the song while the other gems filled in the rest of the lyrics. Honestly, just listening to that goddamn theme song made me want to toss my phone out of the window and burn it with a blowtorch. It reminded me too much of my little brother. And the fact that I didn't lose my mind right then and there was a miracle in and of itself. And again, what else could I expect with 4chan? They were the king of trolls. Once that awful intro ended, I was greeted with the main title of the episode, Smashed Gems, with the background completely devoid of Steven's clothes, along with the washing machine simply sitting there, completely empty, and without a single bit of laundry in it. The scene then transitioned to show the exterior view of the house that the gems lived in, with everything basically simple and peaceful, before it immediately cut to the inside of the house with Steven running around the home in a very frantic manner, with the other gems trying to catch him. "Steven, come on now, you need to get dressed!" Pearl yelled out, holding Steven's shirt in her hands while running. "Come on, Steven!" Amethyst yelled at us as well. "Oh, come on, guys! Why do we even need to go to this meeting anyway? It's not like it'll stop anything," Steven said, running into one of the hallways at a rapid pace. As Steven continued to run across the hallway, he made a misstep, and then ran into Garnet, who was apparently just standing there waiting for Steven. Steven immediately fell down on his rump, before looking up and seeing Garnet, cross-armed, looking down at him. She stood like that for a bit, before picking Steven up from the ground and carrying him into the living room. "Steven, I know you might not think that this is worth doing, but you must understand that this meeting is important," Garnet said, placing Steven down on the ground while the others began to dress him in a suit. "But why though?" Steven asked. "It's not like it's really gonna do anything." "While we may not have a very high chance of persuading the rogue gems to leave the Earth alone, there is still a chance that we could possibly persuade them, and we must take that chance no matter what happens," Garnet answered. "But what if we can't?" Steven said. "Well," Garnet began before Amethyst butted in and said, "We'll beat their butts like we always do." Both Amethyst and Steven proceeded to high-five each other, while Pearl simply looked on and rolled her eyes. "Okay, everyone, we're not going to be kicking anybody's butt. This is supposed to be a civil discussion, and violence isn't going to be tolerated," Pearl answered. "Pearl is right. In fact, just to make sure, we need to give up our weaponry before we get on the teleporter. If we do anything that's even remotely violent during that meeting, even if we are tempted to, it could very well mean the end of the Earth as we know it," Garnet said. Garnet, are you sure that's a good idea?" Amethyst asked. "Yes, I'm sure," Garnet said, as she adjusted the tie on Steven's suit. The scene then cut to show all of the crystal gems making their way onto the transporter pad, but not before removing any and all their weaponry that they had on them. Once completed, they then proceeded to teleport themselves to wherever it was that they were going to. It wasn't exactly specifically mentioned where they were going to, but it was later answered. Well, somewhat. The scene then cut to another launch pad in a very large white gemmed colored hallway, I guess. The others began to make their way off of the pad once they had arrived. The scene itself wasn't really that interesting to look at. In fact, the way that most of the scenery was so purely white, it really hurt my eyes to look at it. And no, it didn't change throughout the duration of the animation either. Thankfully, I had managed to get the rest of the video by dimming the light on my computer. Once the crystal gems made their way to the door, Amethyst opened up the large white door at the end of the hallway, allowing everybody to make their way inside. As they did so, all the gems immediately stopped and their faces looked rather confused. The scene then immediately panned out to show the interior of the room, basically looking somewhat like an office, well, more of a meeting room than anything. Of course, everything looking completely and utterly purely white, but there was nobody there. Where is everyone? Steven asked. I have no idea, dude, Amethyst answered. Garnet, rather confused herself, immediately started to walk back a bit and was about to say something. That is, however, until the entire room started to shake a bit. And then gradually, the shaking started to grow even more violent. Garnet immediately looked down on the ground and noticed that it was starting to crack. Everyone, we need to run, now! Garnet blurted out before everyone began to run back into the platform. However, just as they nearly got there, the cracks that were in the floor immediately burst open and a few stone hands immediately sprang out of the ground and grabbed onto Garnet. The other gems immediately turned around and froze. Garnet! Steven yelled out. The others tried to go and save Garnet, but the other stone hands took them as well. It was then that the hand containing Garnet immediately started to squeeze her in a slow and painful looking way as she gasped and attempted to try and escape. Another stone hand immediately burst out of the floor and then immediately balled itself into a fist before raising itself up high in the air and smashing down hard on the gemstone that was on Garnet, shattering it into pieces, causing her to disappear into complete and utter nothingness as the shards of the gem fell to the ground into nothing. The scene immediately cut to show Garnet, Pearl, and Steven looking on in horror, and they all soon began to panic and attempted to get out of the stone hands as best they could. But like with Garnet, no matter what they did, no matter how they did it, they were completely unsuccessful in their attempts. One by one, each of the gems were slowly crushed before having their gems smashed into pieces and being crushed into complete and utter dust. The last of the gems to be destroyed was Pearl, who simply faded into nothingness as her gems shattered. Steven, through some kind of miracle, or in this case adrenaline, was actually able to activate his gem somehow and break out of the hand that he was in and run back to the teleporter. The last scene of the episode simply showed Steven, completely in shock at what had just happened. He didn't do or say anything. He simply took a few steps off of the platform and stood there. He then slowly turned to where the weaponry were at. The weapons that could have easily saved the gems, that could have saved his friends, that could have saved his own guardians. And with that, Steven immediately collapsed to the ground and began shaking and screaming out the names of Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. And soon he began to sob. The episode then panned out to the shot of the weapons once more, before ending and fading to black. Honestly, my initial reaction to this episode was rather unimpressed. I mean, for one, this was practically nothing like I had originally wanted it to be. I mean, granted, I wasn't originally going to have all of the gems die, although, technically speaking, that kinda was a thought on my end. But then again, I did give the animators permission to pretty much do whatever they wanted, so of course it would only make sense for them to sit there and kinda come up with something like this. And of course, not only that, I do understand that these people were working for free and everything, and making animations a very difficult, a difficult thing to do, but this episode really didn't do it for me. However, I knew that this was pretty much about as good as it was going to get, so I emailed the person back and told them that it was fine to upload it. After sending the message, the video was quickly uploaded to YouTube, and then a link to that video was sent via Tumblr with some kind of clickbaity title. I had waited for a few days before checking to see the responses from all the people on Tumblr at the episode. If anything, my heart was ultimately fluttering with the idea of seeing all their shocked and horrified, well, maybe not their faces, but definitely seeing their shocked and horrified comments. And if anything, logging into my own account, I was so ready to see it. I was so ready to finally get some form of satisfaction after what they all did to my brother. But when I logged in and went to the same page, my heart sunk into the bottom of my chest. Not only had the video been taken down from YouTube via mass flagging, surprisingly enough, or at least that's what I think, but the people who had helped make the animation and who wanted to help me ratted me out to the rest of the people on Tumblr. And if the pain that I was going through wasn't enough to deal with already, this was the deal breaker for me. Everyone on that platform attacked me in ways that I don't think I could even mention on this site without there being issues or them finding me. The harassment and the bullying still continues to this very day. I never did get a full explanation as to what had happened to the video, although I still have my suspicions about it being mass flagged, or why in the world the people decided to rat me out like that. And to add insult to injury, I was also banned permanently from 4chan as well. Not exactly sure how I was able to do that, but it happened. So nothing really wound up coming out of that. And in retrospect, I kinda wish I hadn't posted that. I kinda wish I hadn't even bothered saying anything. Even now, as I type this up, I felt like garbage the first time around, and now I just feel more like an idiot than anything to trust people to help me with something so serious. My parents are still paying off bills. I'm still struggling to find work. And to add to the Sunday of misery, my brother has actually gotten worse. In fact, from what I've been told by my parents, it's likely that his condition is probably going to get so severe that he'll never be let out. So not only did I wind up losing my brother completely by a bunch of people who took such a great offense to something so little, and not only was there a huge miscarriage of justice, but the people who I actually thought were there to help me ultimately slapped me in the face, and now I'm the one that's being targeted. But I did gain one thing out of this, and it's to say this: the world is a disgusting place, and honestly, it's not worth saving. At least, not to me, that is.
In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash, The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horde-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.